Hey Ruben, good to see you.
Hey Rudy, how's it going, man?
I was wondering, how'd you get into this work, this artwork?
There wasn't really one moment. I think it's just been a series. I've always been into the art. Always been into drawing, and I just been fortunate to have a lot of family and teachers from elementary to junior high and high school just encouraging me. They saw I could draw. They kept encouraging me. But as anyone else, especially as an artist of color, I didn't know how one could. I don't know there was a career for artists. I don't know you could sustain yourself as an artist.
Right.
I don't know what it meant to be an artist. But my high school teacher, he really pushed me to say, you really have something, you should pursue the arts. And then I gave it a shot, jumped into it. Again, not knowing, went to undergrad and was like, what is an art? Like, how does one become an artist? I understand the idea of designers, but as an artist, even now, there's times I'm trying to figure things out because you don't have all these role models or people telling you this is how it is to be an artist. You got to pretty much learn it, and it's just been a long journey trying to making constant mistakes and failures.
Ruben, when I was a kid, I loved the arts, but when I thought about art and artists, I thought about like European paintings and like things that I didn't relate to. And your artwork is really like speaks to me and speaks to I think a lot of communities of color. It speaks to Los Angeles. Like how did you begin to integrate the city into your work? Like what was the catalyst for that?
I think that's what when I would take every art class, I'd actually thumb through the back. And when I started learning about the Tres Grandes and Siqueiros, I'd thumb through the back of every art history book to the index and be like, all right, where's the section on Siqueiros? And it wouldn't have it. It'd be all European masters. And I'd be like, it actually kept me from wanting to learn a lot about the art history because the stuff I was learning outside, I had to go to the library. So pretty much for me as an artist was like, how do I bring my own personal subjectivity, my own experience, my own identity into the work? And the city pretty much became, the city wasn't necessarily the subject. It just, the subject was my community, was my surroundings. And the city kind of became part of that in the sense like thinking of how the built environment defines identity, defines people, how through civic engineering and also like civic failure, it defines people of color. And so for me, my work kind of tackles that. So I was like, for me, I had to, that's why I started addressing the city in that sense, pretty much the community, the social fabric around me. How did you get into advocacy and support? The stuff you're doing is just quite amazing.
Well, Ruben, I tell folks that when I was a kid, when I was younger, I wanted to get rich. That was like what my dream was, quote unquote. And I think that the reason why that was the case is because my mom raised me and my brother by herself. She was a waitress for over 3 decades, and we didn't have a lot. And I'm the first in my family to go to school. And so when I was a kid, I was like, I need to get rich to take care of my mom. That was like my only mission. And I was a lackluster, like mediocre student. And I took an ethnic studies class in college.
Right.
I was a business major, and I took this elective ethnic studies class.
Nice.
And that changed my life. And I started to realize that it wasn't just about my family getting rich, it was about all of us getting rich. And there was systemic issues that were keeping us from the things that we deserved and that we're worthy of. And that's kind of what catalyzed my work. And so, I finished that degree in business because I was halfway through it. And, I was thinking about how do I build community? And so all my work today is really still about resources and about money. But now it's really about how do we make sure that the folks that have never had that money get it? How do we make sure that folks in our neighborhoods have the resources that they deserve so they can live the lives that they deserve? And so that's how I got into this work. So it was kind of by chance, man. I was, wanted to get rich, and then I took this ethnic studies class, and I saw these civil rights heroes that look like me. Right. And I was like, yo, they're talking about, they look like me. Right. They're like Mexicans, and they're like mobilizing people, and they're talking about the things that I experienced. And so that I still get a little chills when I think about that, because I was like a 18-year-old kid, and I was like didn't know what I was going to do, and it took me down a different path.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's really compelling. I think man, I mean, it's things that inform us that we have no idea that's going to direct us lead us in those directions.
So yeah, Ruben, so that's kind of like how I got into this work, and I feel really lucky to do the work that I'm doing now. I helped create the organization that I work at. It's called Inclusive Action for the City. We do advocacy work because we believe that the reason why folks are struggling is because there's the systemic issues and policies that are harming them. And we also do lending work. We provide capital, low interest loans and assistance to small businesses. And one of the biggest clients, the biggest groups of clients that we work with are street vendors. We're really passionate about supporting micro entrepreneurs in our neighborhoods like street vendors. I actually wanted to ask you a question, Ruben, because you've been, I don't want to, documenting street vendors, or street vendors have been part of your artwork for a long time, and I've had a chance to work with you recently. I mean, I'm curious, how did street vendors come into your artwork?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been more, it's just been my upbringing and livelihood. I mean, my family, they were vendors. They were street vendors. They were selling tortillas, and it just became my daily upbringing and how my family would put food on the table. They would sustain themselves by selling tortillas, and then eventually my dad worked construction and would still sell tortillas, and my mom, she pioneered a whole tortilla route in North County of San Diego, and then eventually it was like an evolution of vendors. She then was able to put together a brick and mortar restaurant, but we still had to sell tortillas, me and my brothers. So it just was just part of our everyday chores. Like everything we did was to get the mercancía, to get the products, and prepare to sell tortillas every Saturday. And the only way I got out of that was going to college. Like yourself, I'm the only one that was able to make it to college. First one in my family to go to college, and that's the only time I stopped. And I chose to go to Otis when I was in MacArthur Park because of all the energy, all the street vendors. It just felt familiar. It was something I was accustomed to seeing. People getting the hustle on, people working, and I approach it the same way with my practice. It's a way of like spatial thinking that's this resourcefulness of small business, entrepreneur, but also just being resourceful, trying to, to develop a cart, a vehicle, a paletero cart, a frutero cart, this way of approaching sites and space and pretty much trying to make it. You're trying to put food on the table. You're trying to sustain yourself. And as an artist, I do that too. I try to how to develop your work. How do you get the work out there? I see myself as a small business. And that's the first thing I tell students too. You guys are a small business now. You guys got to treat yourselves like a small business. There's overhead, there's costs, and you have to be prepared that the tax man is going to still come after you. Yeah. And you got to figure out how to navigate these things. And I see the same thing with street vendors. From what my parents do to the relationships I built in MacArthur Park with other street vendors back in the days.
That's why that resourcefulness and like the ganas, the grit that's there with street vendors is like why the street vendor campaign was formed. And I was lucky to be part of that in the beginning, and it was like 12 years ago that the LA Street Vendor Campaign was formed. The campaign is a coalition of organizations and vendors that came together to support vendors, because despite like our love for vendors and like the resourcefulness that we see in them and how inspired we are by them, the city was criminalizing them. They still are. Just last week there was an incident where right there in Glassell Park there was a taco vendor, a really popular one, that had their stuff thrown away, and it was it's traumatizing. And so we've been working for a long time to protect vendors and to make sure that the laws are changed so vendors take their rightful place in our community as entrepreneurs, as small business owners that activate our public space.
It is this failure of of civic planning. It's just seeing the work you do, looking at what you've been doing on from the website and following. What both Inclusive Action for the City and also like Community Power Collective and the other coalition of organizations supporting vendors. I see what you guys put out there and how it could be a plan for the city to follow. It's just unfortunate to see these incidents, and that's I think what's gotten me more, especially during this pandemic, like seeing a lot of street vendors being attacked, harassed, and being hit hard by the pandemic. Really made me put my practice, use my platform to address this. It's something I saw, like I recognized, like I saw my family in them, I saw my parents in them. It's a story of immigrants, and my parents, they come from Mexico, they're immigrants, and for me, as first gen, I'm addressing things from not necessarily, it's not just about vending, it's about the invisible labor and the hustle and the exploitation and how people of color, brown bodies are just we're just the workforce, and it's like we gotta how do we get them to the next level? How do we level up? And the stuff you're doing is like.
Well, Ruben, I actually, that word that you just used, invisible labor, is really thought-provoking for me, because it seems to me from your artwork, especially the filter that you did with Snap, I don't know if you want to describe it a little bit, but is really making it visible.
Right.
Like when I see the filter, the Snap filter that you designed, and like the artwork that you're doing and the fine art screen prints that you're doing, like you are honoring these entrepreneurs in a way that I don't see that often, Like, do you want to tell us about that?
It's, I mean, I luckily I had the opportunity to work with LACMA and Snapchat, and it's as an artist, it's not one just like milestone where it's put me at this place to be able to make this work. It's actually like years of failure, just like project after project, and you're just eventually they recognize the work and success, and I got invited by LACMA and by Snapchat to create this project, and for me it was to pay tribute to the vendors and to create Vendedores Presente, making them visible. The idea was to address monumental perspectives. And I started looking up the idea of what a monument is. And this past year, everyone's tearing down these monuments, and the idea of a monument being this larger-than-life figure, history. And I'm like, well, that's street vendors. That's our culture. That's what I grew up. We're larger than life, and I want to really expose that, like really blow it up. And so when you open up the app, you see this large frutero cart come floating down. You see this large paletero cart pulling up with the paletas. As a kid, you're always like admiring the paletero, and you're always like looking for the ice cream man. And as a child, it's always like larger. You're looking up to it. And so I really want to tap into that and tap into like this. And you worded it once, like they're magical. For me, it was like actually looking into like this magical realism that comes from like Latin America, and explore like this. The elotero volador flying around like this like Zeppelin type thing, like sprinkling all the tarin and the bouncing orange. Like I really want to explore aspects, make it monumental in scale, but the other part was also the monumentality of it was making this connection with you, with Sergio, with LACMA and Snapchat, having this like multi-billion dollar corporation and multi-million dollar cultural institution, LACMA, in collaboration and in conjunction with both Inclusive Action nonprofit and CPC, like a grassroots organization. Like for me, that's the monumentality. Like, how do we get these people all in the same room to talk and really have a direct impact to support vendors?
Yeah, I think what's cool about that project is it's cool that I get to work with you and Pete and LACMA and the folks at Snap. But I think what's interesting to me is that it reminds me that everybody has a role to play in making our communities better. And sometimes I think folks are like, Rudy, how do I get involved? And I want to support decriminalizing street vending in LA. I want to lower the permit fees for vendors. Like, what do I do? And sometimes it requires us to go to City Hall and provide public comment. Sometimes it requires a protest. Sometimes it requires an artist to roll up and make vendors, make sure that folks know that vendors are larger than life, And so like, it's been cool to see you use your talents to participate in the movement. So yeah, Ruben, it's been amazing to see you do your work, and like we're really grateful that you've lent your expertise and your skills and your network to this movement.
Thank you to you. I mean, both you, Inclusive Action for the City, and Sergio from Community Power Collective. It's been really amazing to see the work you guys do, and then allow you to guys continue to do the work you're doing, and giving the ability for an artist to come in and reach out to you guys, cold call to you guys, and say, hey, I have this idea. I got invited for this project, and I really want to put street vendors on the map through the artistic process, through an AR lens, because you guys are already doing all the grassroots, all the civic engineering. You guys are already addressing all the city policies, and which is as an artist, like back in my day, like going through student organizations and protesting, I was doing that, but as I invested more in my practice, for me, I found that as a more viable way for me to address these issues using my platform. And
Ruben, so like when you rolled up and talked about Snapchat, and I was like, oh, I need to re-download that app, and that I had to understand what an AR lens and all this stuff was. I was a little skeptical that vendors were going to be about this, And I know that you talked to vendors. That was something that you did, is you wanted to work directly with vendors on this. Like, what did you learn? Like, what did the vendors say about this?
I mean, from speaking with Sergio and yourself, it's okay about Snapchat. I didn't know about Snapchat either. I had to download it and get to learn how to use Snapchat. But I think what was awesome was that hearing from Sergio and one of the vendors we interviewed was Merlin. And Merlin, like Sergio went to Merlin and he was skeptical about it and said, there's this artist who wants to do this AR lens. Do you know anything about lenses? And Merlin, she sells hot dogs in Hollywood. She was like, oh, I know from what I've saw word of mouth. What I was told was that she's like, oh, I know Snapchat. She goes, I use it all the time. Uso los lenses cada vez. And Sergio was like, what? For real? And she's like, yeah, yo lo uso and let's do this. And I was like, wow. So I have to give shout outs to Merlin Alvarado, because she like really hooked it up. I mean, she really convinced Sergio. Sergio went back to you and you guys were like, all right, let's do this.
That's amazing.
Which was pretty awesome. I had, I mean, for me, it's, I learned a lot from you guys. You guys really, I had this idea to do this lens and to have it grow in a certain way. I really want to impact vendors directly. As an artist, getting the image out there, getting the graphic out there is not just one way of doing it. I knew it had to be much more than just pay tribute and create this AR lens. And speaking to you guys really helped me develop that. Was you guys were telling me what they really need right now is direct cash, direct support. Because of the pandemic, they're not getting stimulus checks. And so for me, it was like, all right, how does this lens become a tool for advocacy and rewrite the narrative? And from there, we developed it developed a whole social campaign. One, creating street posters so that the city itself could see that this project was coexisting in the city. And the other was to create a public programming with LACMA and a docuseries with Pete Galindo, and he went and interviewed a lot of the street vendors, the leaders that you guys introduced us to, so they could tell their side of the story. It wasn't just from my side or from Pete's side or from anyone else's. It was their voice, their direct voice. And the other part was for me to build a website, and where that becomes as a tool, not just for those interested in the project, they go visit the website and learn about the project. It was more of a tool for vendors, so they could learn about their derechos, learn about their rights, and how to get permits. And all that came from having conversations with you and Sergio, what vendors need, and if this is going to be a tool, then this is what they need. They need to get access on what are their rights when they're getting harassed by the cops or by other people that aren't supportive of vendors.
Ruben, even the fine art prints is something that came out of this, you know? Like, I think that's a cool thing, is that you created this piece of art, this exhibition, this activation with LACMA and SNAP, but then you also were able to connect us to support the Street Vendor Emergency Fund that our organizations have been working for over the year during the pandemic to raise money to get cash to vendors. And so thank you for that. I mean, the fine art prints are beautiful and amazing, but then also all that money's coming to street vendors directly has been really critical. When I was a kid, I'm wondering, I want to ask you a question, if there's any like young people listening to this. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist, but kind of similar to you, I relate to you that there was not a lot of guidance, and I'm wondering, do you have any advice for folks that want to be an artist, or folks that want to do community work?
Don't do it. No, I'm kidding.
Don't do it.
No, I mean, don't do the art thing. I'm kidding. Do the community work. No, it's really, like I mentioned earlier, it's, I had no direction. Now there's much more. I mean, now with social media, Now you could look up any artist. You could look up any artist of color. You could find them through Instagram, Facebook, through the web. Back then, you had to just rely what was written and what was written in like these books of like European masters, and there wasn't that representation. So now there's much more representation. And I mean, how does one become an artist? I think it's just a personal drive. You just keep at it. It's not easy. It's not an easy road. Inclusion to the museums and galleries doesn't necessarily equal financial stability. So you still got to hustle. You still got to work 5 or 6 jobs, trying to support your habit, and the habit is art making. There's different ways to be an artist. There's so many facets. You don't have to just be in the fine arts. You could be in illustration. You could be in design. You could be in video game making. So there's so many more outlets now, which is awesome. That wasn't available for me when I was young. And the same for like community activism. There's so many possibilities. There's so many organizations. If you are interested in supporting street vendors, supporting small businesses, even climate issues, there's an organization out there. You could reach out to them, and they're more than willing to, I'm sure, welcome those in.
It's kind of the same, I think, for on our side of the world. Like, it's, I think, I was talking to our friend Oscar about this just a little bit ago about how we approach work.
Right.
And I don't know, when I talk to like young people or anybody that wants to like do community development work or any type of job, I always ask them like, do they really care about it?
Right.
You know? Because you could feel when someone is doing their job with like from a place of love, and you could also feel it when it's not coming from that place. Right. And one of my favorite quotes is from the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, who says, "Work is love made visible."
Nice.
Work is love made visible. And so I think a lot about that in like what I'm doing. I'm like, man, like the day that I don't love my work is the day that I need to go. Because, right, you know, it's true. Like it's taxing. It's like you got to bust your butt, and sometimes you're not going to get paid, or sometimes, you know, you're going to have to make tough decisions, or it's not going to be the best day all the time. But if you really love the work, that's like where you got to be, you know. And so
you got to have that passion for
totally it. Yeah. And I think that that's what I tell folks is like, look for that.
No, thank you. That was amazing. That was great. I mean, to hearing your side and hearing how you approach it, hearing what you do with the organization, it's really mind-blowing and inspiring. Man,
it's been a pleasure. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to do more work together, and I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for your time too. I appreciate it.